Chapter 2. After the party was over, the last lights blossomed in the sky and the cars disappeared down the driveway. Ben took them all to the local clam bar in Sag Harbor. Luckily, the jukebox was broken so that it was quieter than usual. 8 or 9 fat, solitary men squatting on bar stools looked up as they entered, laughing loudly. Immediately, Andre said in a provocative tone, "Look at all those asses dripping over the stools. What an image for the 4th of July. Think of all those fat, lonely asses on the stools stretching onward, expanding like tombstones into infinity." "You bore me," said Maya. Andre was already quite drunk. When drunk, he resembled a blind bull. He turned round and round upon himself and never stopped talking. "Once I was working in a garage in Detroit. I'd just come to the States and needed to make a little bread. One night I took some girls out and they asked me what religion I was, and I said I was an atheist. The next day the boss called me into his office and said, 'Look, I know you're from France, but stop teasing these girls. I know you're not an atheist. It was a joke, wasn't it?' Crazy. A week later, you know what? My boss went home to dinner one night and his wife was undressing in front of the window, and across the street another guy was watching her and jerking off. The boss picked up a gun and shot him dead. He went to court and was acquitted. Public opinion was for him. Of course, this was in 1958. Still, I'd be happy if Maya inspired someone to amuse himself." Contradiction. Bells should have rung. Maya did repeat, "You bore me." Andre didn't seem at all jealous of the electricity that had begun to crackle and flow between Maya and Robert. On the wall behind the door, Ben stopped to inspect a painting of an old whaling ship rendered with acute detail. "There's somebody home there," said Maya. "And that coat rack in the corner is quite lovely, too," she remarked. "It's like a Brancusi sculpture, so much better than all those modern minimalist sculptures you see." In the back of the room there was a billiard table. The year before, Ben said there had been a bowling machine. Ben had been drinking quite a lot and hadn't eaten anything at his party earlier. It was impossible to know how much liquor he absorbed during the day, but it was a substantial quantity. Although he had undergone several detox cures, often drinking nothing but water for 6 months, Ben had a way of falling abruptly back into alcohol. At such times he would say, "I heard yesterday that Buñuel, the famous Spanish filmmaker, is alcoholic too. But he does pretty good stuff, don't you think? All the more reason I tell myself to go on drinking." Upon that particular night, Ben already had a good head start. He kept talking back and forth with Maya and had obviously fallen under the influence of her extraordinary high-pitched charm. "You know what? You're my little sister," he kept trying to convince her. At the same time, in front of both Ben and Andre, Maya was engaging Robert, who was not slow to respond. Openly, without reserve, as if to show her independence, flaunting her liberty. It wasn't certain whether Ben knew what was happening. Andre did. Vexed, he stomped, stalked, and fumed. "Quit playing these games," he demanded. "What for?" came her quick retort. "I want to live for everything." "You better leave now if you want to live." Again her ironic, savage, "What for? It's the 4th of July festival. Once a year, you know, everything is permitted. I'm having a good time. I'm amusing myself. If you're not, you're free to leave." Was it the presence of Ben, of the others, that kept Andre from slugging Robert, attacking Maya? Or did he feel that his control of her was such that he didn't need to worry about physical possessiveness? As masters sometimes allow their dogs off the leash, was he condescending to give Maya a moment of unleashed liberty? Carolina hadn't wanted to come, but had finally let herself be persuaded by Ben. She would often say, "I don't like cocktail parties. People are always so self-promoting. If they had a good relationship with their dog, they wouldn't have to go there." Now she was managing to make the best of she could of Robert's antics. She was all too willing to give him this liberty, and had often encouraged it. She was totally against the kind of jealousy and possessiveness that pushes a man and woman to devour each other. Carolina felt there was complicity between them that went beyond whatever he might do. Still, it did hurt her to see him cavorting so openly in public. Did he have to use her presence as an arena in which to prove his independence? Louise sat next to Ben. She had become very quiet and demure, playing a humble defensive role. The atmosphere of the evening, the bright gaiety of the party, the fireworks that for a moment had cut the sky to ribbons, had triggered something deeply in all of them. The summer had begun with a bang, and already it seemed that this evening would serve as a launching pad for everything that was to come later. Robert, too, felt the terrible need to go outward, to expand himself. The volatile moods of Protean Carolina, their constant oscillations, all encouraged him now into great openness. There was a moment when life had to be seized, when a man like a trapeze artist had to leap without knowing whether his outstretched hands would catch a bar or fall to the nothingness of space. What did it matter anyway? He was sure they were all so drunk and delirious that by tomorrow everything would be forgotten. Ben, ebullient as a godfather, surrounded by his adopted family, ordered another white label and soda, followed by a round of clams on the half-shell and clam chowder for all of them. The clams were small and exquisitely fresh. They ate them before the clam chowder and then again afterwards. It was a little like having dessert. How pleasant it was, after the hot chowder, to have the clams return, Robert said as they tasted like ice cream from the sea. "Let's have some more," Andre urged. Ben called the waitress over and asked her to bring her another round of clams. "How long have you been working in this joint?" he wanted to know. "I've worked here all my life. I'm the fisherman's daughter." "That puts you in your place, Ben," Maya said. "Stay there." Right, muttered Ben and became very quiet for a moment. "How can anyone know what their place is if they have to stay in it all the time?" Carolina wondered, glancing at Robert. Robert paid no attention. He felt a rare spark had flashed between Maya and himself. Some sign had identified them as belonging to the same nervous family. Maya stretched her body out sideways on the seat like a panther exercising. Robert moved against her. He was mad for her. Under the table he tried to play hide-and-go-seek with her hands. She moved them away. "They're like children. They're just playing," Carolina said to Ben. Ben made a movement with his hands as if brushing flies away from his head and announced he was going to have another drink and then go home. He had just driven out from New York City that morning. Leaning over Robert's shoulder, Maya announced to no one in particular how much she loved this local bar. "It's wonderful," she said. "It's classic Americana." Andre then jumped up on his chair, his voice half drowned in the din, amusingly crooned, "This is America, America, America. Land of highways, hot dogs, and lights. Of cash, commotion, and chaos. Motels, churches, and communist fears. Kids touch footballing on the White House lawn. Salesmen groaning in front of empty doors. Fantastic sounds breaking through space. Wah, jaw, faw, caw, cat, cool, man, dig, hip, yeah, super wow." Everyone in the clam bar laughed and clapped. At the end of the bar, a squat, sturdy blonde woman stood up and jeered raucously. "In my country, in certain bars in Marseille, you can see the same thing," Louise remarked. "This ain't nothing but a local bar in Sag Harbor," said Ben, "and you gotta keep the proportions right." "Hey, baby, don't forget this was a whaling town," Maya answered quickly, "and that's what I'm looking for, the great white whale." "Funny to hear you say that," Ben laughed. "I always had you pegged for an Egyptian sphinx." Seeing how the delirium was spreading everywhere, Carolina began to laugh. Her laughter spread out like a Japanese fan, cool, soft, and gracious. Bored with the nonsense, Maya knocked her head against Robert's. He realized what he hadn't wanted to admit. Like a car going faster and faster, the evening was escaping their control. They were no longer acting so much as being acted upon by other forces and atomic states of mind. All this is a test, Robert thought, nothing but a test, and you must somehow endure it and move into the space beyond. Ben, by now infected too, was looking up at Maya and imitating her gestures, her bright laughter and the swift, lively movements of her hands. Putting his own hands in the side of his face, he let out a loud squawk. Ben poured himself another drink and mumbled something. He clearly had had too much. But his lapses only seemed to stimulate Maya. Quite superbly, she kept slashing at him with her brilliance. Robert was stunned. This was a side of her that he hadn't seen. At the end of the bar, next to the raucous blonde woman, Andre skulked. Carolina rose and joined him. Every now and then Andre shook his head in disgust. Louise broke her silence to announce, "It is very crazy, no, how busy this bar is tonight?" True, it was the 4th of July, but in such a small town as Sag Harbor, at past 2 in the morning? The door didn't stop opening and shutting. Brawny, boisterous men swaggered in and out. "It's because of all the activity down at the fishing port," Maya answered. "The fishing boats going in and out, and the fishermen coming in for a drink." She paused. Ben and Robert both knew the port was closed down during the night. There was absolutely no fishing activity at all. But Louise was so curious that Maya continued, putting her on. "It's on account of the whaling activity, too, you know?" It wasn't clear whether Louise had understood, but Robert and Ben broke up laughing. "That's not bad," Ben kept saying. Admiringly, he glanced across the table at Maya. Maya blinked her eyes and hid her head for a moment behind Robert's shoulders, squeezing his arms as she did so. Robert felt full of her light, of her energy, but fearful of the consequences, certain acts being irretrievable, and suddenly became aware of how he must be hurting Carolina. Something felt twisted and broken inside his stomach. He withdrew slightly. Ben must have sensed something too, for he stopped drinking and looked up solemnly long enough to say, "It's a little bit late for you two to be coming up with such charm, isn't it, baby?" Maya smiled but said nothing. She turned and started whispering rapidly to Louise. Ben sank back a little resigned. "All right, Maya," he murmured. "All right, you're not too bad." Something in this family reunion of exiled souls had adopted each other what was going sour. Too late, Ben realized what was happening. "My God, you're a pretty intelligent girl," he said to Maya. His tone changed, became somber. "Don't be stupid. I don't think you and Robert should be so close together. Your heads are too strong, and you and Andre are such a good two-headed animal." "What do I care for your morality?" countered Maya, impetuously bumping her head against Robert's. Robert felt a new emotion stir inside him. He knew he had entered the danger zone. Maya could do whatever she pleased. She had won the night for herself. In this game she had triumphed. Like a beast in a labyrinth, lured now here, now there, Robert struck out at melting mirages, fantasies that faded as soon as they were formed. Carolina was far away, watching them with amused, ironical indifference. She thought, if he truly belongs to me, he'll be with me. If not, he won't. The bar began to spin like a merry-go-round. The walls shrank, and Maya's head was enlarged as if projected upon a screen. Although Louise tried to restrain her, Maya got up suddenly, pulling Robert with her. "Let's go and see the billiards." Only too happy to leave the table's oppressively ambiguous atmosphere, Robert rushed to the smoky rear room with her. Maya pranced up and down with excitement. For her, the night was just beginning to unfold, and its hidden possibilities emerge. The moment they were safely away from the table, Maya stood on her tiptoes, threw herself against him, almost collapsing Robert with her embraces. Of course, he responded. How could he get himself to say no at such a moment? Even if he had the willpower, he couldn't have done it. After the cool arabesque and oriental harmonies of Carolina, he was recklessly overjoyed to abandon himself to this hysteria. It didn't matter that they were both giddy. It didn't matter that everyone was looking at them. It didn't matter that Andre was murderously smashing the billiard balls. It didn't matter that another night would come, and another, and another, and another, and another. How could their fury be contained or sustained? At bottom, Robert was as desirous of losing himself in Maya as she was of losing herself in him. Together, could they vanish? The old theme in Robert's head surfaced. Throw yourself away, fling yourself like a match into the barn of a woman. Life's nothing particularly today, so hard to have a dignity. Nothing but a grain of sand pouring away along with the other lost grains. Good. Who cares? What difference did it make? He kissed her, enjoyed the feeling of letting that part of himself flow into her. Carolina herself once said, Throw yourself like a knife into the trunk of a springtime tree. If you don't vibrate, you're other than you're supposed to be. Andre stood with his cue raised, poised menacingly in his hand like a spear. An obese, sloppy-shouldered youth slouched over the tattered green table and racked the bright-colored balls. They jumped together with a military clack. Effaced in the corner, half hidden in the shadows, Carolina laughed. You all look like soldiers. Why don't you challenge each other to a duel? Then it happened. Robert shot first. The white ball burst into the fixed triangle, exploding it. Balls scattered in every direction. A red one dropped in a pocket. Maya squealed with excitement. Andre was serious and enraged. Robert stroked the cue again. Maya cried out. There was a bewildering whirl of aimless motion. Andre lurched over the edge, drew the cue carefully, painstakingly back between his arched fingers, and let loose. Wow, Maya cried. The spinning balls disintegrated in a profusion of bright, cool color. Maya's body careened into Robert's. On that crazy evening, were they not at all like billiard balls, ricocheting off the slightest impulse of their feelings into each other? Maya pressed against him, dancing, her face and her eyes lit up. Robert let his lips run across her cheeks, trying to convey to her quickly, as in a telegram, how wonderful she was. He didn't have much time. When his cue he held up like a sword, Andre lunged at him. Robert leaped aside. There was a brief, intense scuffle. At the back of the room, Ben and Louise sat observing them. She didn't know what to say or do. Ben's face had changed. It grimaced with discomfort as he pleaded with them to stop it all. The few blows Andre had thrown didn't satisfy him. Curiously, he didn't seem angry with Robert anymore. All his fury was directed at Maya. Snappily, she spun on her feet as Robert grabbed her by the arm and they strolled back to the table. They sat down. Ben didn't say anything. He got up, ordered a beer. Carolina hung back in the shadows, feeling a stranger to everything. She couldn't understand what was happening or why Robert was deserting her like that. When the waitress came over with the check, Maya told her how wonderful the clams had been. Noticing her accent, the fisherman's daughter looked at her curiously and asked, "Where are you from?" Maya hesitated, hating to be put on the spot by such a typically direct American question. "Over the hills," she answered. It was a fine reply. Even Louise laughed. The waitress was perplexed. "Where? Over there? What hills?" As if nothing could be simpler, Maya repeated, "Over the hills." The waitress turned away, perplexed but seemingly resigned to her confusion. The tension dropped. At 4 a.m, people start thinking of going to bed, even in the Hamptons. Carolina yawned. She took Robert's hand. Ben passed his beer around. For a moment it was almost as if nothing had happened. But Maya leaned over and whispered to Robert, "You know, when I was talking about the whale, I just meant the search for the impossible." How well he knew that. The impossible. The absolute. Totality of a passion. Unity of two minds. Harmony of a love or a life. The forever inaccessible. What had they been doing all evening but searching each in his own way for that absolute? Softly, with an agonizing sweetness, Carolina kissed Robert. Ben put his arm around Louise, who stiffened uncomfortably. Maya told her to stop acting like that. Louise retaliated by rolling up 2 white fangs out of paper, putting them in her mouth and grinning with them like Dracula at Ben and Maya. Maya, overcome with laughter, rested her lovely head on Andre's shoulder, and Ben said they looked so well together. "Don't lie to me," said Andre. "Tell me what kind of game you were playing." "Don't bother to forgive me. It wasn't a mistake." Louise whispered into Robert's ear. "She's so strong, so terribly and dangerously strong. Why is it then that the only thing she puts any value on is succumbing?" "Bitch," Andre snarled as Louise gripped Maya protectively. Ben paid the bill. The bar was being closed, an iron grill lowered over the lines of whiskey bottles. "Fantastic," said Carolina. "It's as if they're putting the alcohol animals back in their cages." They walked out onto Sag Harbor's deserted main street. In the diagonal parking strips there were only a few white police cars. All the fireworks had long been buried in the deep, beckoning majesty of that early July night. Like a little puppy, Louise trotted behind while Andre dragged Maya off. She was too weak to protest as Andre pulled her by the arm, but she managed to murmur to Robert, "I felt so comfortable with you for a moment." "But that's marvelous," he began to say, but she walked off with Andre, and he cut himself short with a rebuke. "Idiot," he muttered. What a fool he was to have let himself get so excited for such an illusory spark of feeling. In the Volvo station wagon driving back over the bridge, Ben said, "But things are simple, aren't they?" "I don't know," said Robert, shaking his head. Carolina hugged him. "I hope you found the truth this evening." "What's the truth?" he asked, more out of weariness than a desire to hear anything about the truth, whatever that might be. "The truth," said Carolina. "You don't have to look for it. It's inside you. It's that. It's a laughing cow."